Turn in our Bibles to 2 Thessalonians, or 1 Thessalonians, chapter 5. There's consequences when we quench the Holy Spirit of God, and we have to be so careful of that. And that's why I entitled this, Don't You Dare Put Out That Fire. The word extinguish, or quench, means to extinguish. And Paul is talking about, of course, the Holy Spirit of God and dousing the work of the Spirit out. And listen to the way he puts it. Verse 19, do not quench the Spirit. Do not despise prophetic utterance, but examine everything carefully. Hold fast to that which is good. Abstain from every form of evil. How do we quench the Spirit? We quench the Spirit by despising the supernatural. That's why he says in verse 19, not to quench the Spirit, and do not despise prophetic gifts or utterances. Some of your translations may say, set it not. The word which means to despise. The case he's talking about here is prophetic gifts. But Paul says, remember to not despise prophetic gifts. You see, it comes when the church needs it. Sometimes it's a word of comfort. Sometimes we need a word of comfort. Sometimes it's a word of guidance. We need guidance. Sometimes it's a word of warning. We need words of warning or encouragement. Sometimes it's national judgment or edification, but God still sends His Word through people. And He still sends His Word to change things or to build up. Paul said, don't despise the Word that God sends to you. Sometimes what we do is we reject that Word because it's not what we want to hear. Paul writes in 2 Timothy chapter 4, I solemnly charge you in the presence of God and of Jesus Christ, who is to judge the living and the dead, and by His appearing and His kingdom, preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with great patience and instruction. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance to their own desires, and will turn away from their ears from the truth, and will turn aside to myths. Do not despise those words from God, because they are supernatural gifts, and they're words from heaven. And when you do that, you quench the Spirit of God in your life. You put out the fire of God. Second thing I believe Paul is saying, we quench the Holy Spirit of God when we allow error to remain unchallenged. Verse 21, he says, examine everything carefully. Discern everything. We need to be doing that today. We have so many different things that's on Christian television, and some of it is good, and some of it is good for nothing. And you have to discern and say, Lord, what is good? What is right? Test, he says. At the same time that we're testing, we're being open to what God is doing. God is doing so much in this world today. And we ought to be open to that. I've run across a lot of people in the last 20, 22 years that they will not be open to anything God is doing unless what God is doing is in their denomination. And you know, God's not really a Baptist. I know it disappoints some of you, but He's not a Methodist either. And God is doing some things in this world, and it's a God thing, and it's not a Pentecostal thing or a Baptist thing or a Methodist thing. It's a God thing.